debating not doing this because I kind of ripped into this guy yesterday. But there was another clip that I saw from Ben Burgis's appearance on the Joe Rogan program. And I honestly can't help myself. Ben Burgis was on the Joe Rogan program, not only discussing and engaging in disparaging conspiracy theories about transgender people and providing no pushback whatsoever in regards to how trans people should be treated to Joe Rogan, but he's also been defending Andy Ngo, saying that Antifa are harassing and assaulting Andy Ngo, and that's a bad thing. And in my opinion, I personally think engaging in transphobic conspiracy is pretty bad. But you could just make the argument he's genuinely ignorant. This is not something you can make that argument on. You can just not talk about Andy Ngo, right? Like, you can choose, all right, I don't know much about Andy Ngo. I'm just not going to enable a fascist. Andy Ngo recently inspired another mass shooter in Portland last weekend. So you can't really, like, Andy Ngo in the news now for inspiring another mass shooter, and you're going to defend him on Joe Rogan's show that week. That's not good. So again, I want to be very clear. I consider Ben Burgis someone that is hopefully amenable to having these kinds of conversations. If he wants to come on the program and discuss this, I would love that. But he made a very large series of miscalculations on this Joe Rogan interview. And people tell me that he's done other good parts of the Joe Rogan interview, and that's possible. But, again, the way I see it, he is going on there as a leftist to represent the left. And he's throwing trans people under the bus, and I made that video yesterday. And here he is throwing left-wing activists under the bus, anti-fascist activists under the bus, for no reason. There's no reason to do this. Like, the interview would have been better if you would have just avoided talking about this. This doesn't legitimize you to the right. All this does is legitimize you, legitimize the idea of transphobia. The far left are the problem. Even regular left people think that there's questions to ask about trans people. Even regular left-wingers think that Antifa is bad. All you're doing is legitimizing the right with this stuff. You could just not talk about it. But anyway, here's him, Ben Burgis, going on the Joe Rogan show to talk about Antifa and Andy Ngo.
So I think the idea that fascism is what's like on the horizon in America, I don't think makes sense.
Now, again, I got into a very big beef with Ben Burgis last year in his take on January 6th. He said, again, fascists planted bombs in Washington, D.C., and fascists brought guns to Washington, D.C. Again, Oath Keepers were charged with sedition because they had guns down the goddamn street from the Capitol that they were going to raid the Capitol with. They wanted to assault and murder the vice president. But fascism isn't on the horizon. Like, when I had Ben Burgis on my show and we talked about January 6th, and I talked about the rising trend in right-wing violence, and especially with Kyle Rittenhouse getting free again, there was just another mass shooter. Another mass shooting took place in Portland last weekend. Inspired by Andy Ngo, a right-wing, far-right fascist shot 5 people and killed a 60-year-old woman. This is literally happening all over the place. Ben Burgis, that week, a couple days after after all of these events happen, he goes on there to defend the right, defend Andy Ngo, and attack Antifa. I just can't.
I think that arose under very different circumstances than what we've got right now. I think that the role that, like, the things that fascists were doing in, like, Germany before they took over there, Italy before they took over there, were in response to the perception that the system was under threat and there would be, like, maybe even, like, communist revolution, and this was, like, the only thing that the wealthy elites could kind of turn to stop that from happening, would be like allying with like German business interests, allying with Hitler. And that's just such a radically different situation.
Well, first of all, That's a really bad example. If you want to say that things in the 1920s in Germany, are different than now, that's a bad example, because all of these corporations love Republicans. They donate to Republicans all the time. They donate to Republicans in crucial swing states. They are not liberal. They loved Donald Trump. These corporations did ally with the right-wingers and with the fascists that tried to overthrow the government on January 6, 2021. So why, out of all the ways you can bring up 1920s Germany to say that it's so different from America, you chose one of the ways that is not different at all. Corporations are allying with the right.
It states now that I think the idea that you'd be obsessed with like street fighting with, with like the few people who like, the Richard Spencer types or whatever.
Again, days before this Joe Rogan episode aired, a mass shooter right-wing extremist inspired by Andy Ngo shot 5 people in Portland for no reason and killed one of them, a 60-year-old woman. But Ben Burgis says, don't pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to the people storming the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Don't pay attention to the neo-Nazis in Rhode Island. Don't pay attention to the Proud Boys at school boards with guns. Don't pay attention to any of this stuff. Buy my book, Canceling Comedians.
Just seems, I think that makes no sense. I think that it's a diversion. I mean, I think it's a distraction, honestly, from things that actually matter more. And I think that it's really dangerous when people would make excuses for behavior like attacking Andy Ngo, because because if you think about that, like here's the thing that
again, Ben Burgis could have just not brought up Andy Ngo. But why is Ben Burgis in an anti-left rant? Why? What does this accomplish? Like, if he wants to go on and rep the left, you can do that without saying, yeah, I agree with your transphobia, Joe. Yeah, maybe. You can do that without saying, yeah, well, Andy Ngo, he's not that bad of a guy, man, and, the left is really weird. Like, if you're trying to go on there to rep DSA, you're doing a horrible fucking job. Like, this is just so ridiculous. And again, I would have considered myself a fan of Ben Burgis. I don't know what this is, and I don't know why people aren't giving him any pushback for this. Like, I mean, well, this video has 11,000 views, and it is giving him pushback. But whoever's interviewing Ben Burgis, he needs pushback. This is not okay. It's not okay to throw trans people under the bus. It's not okay to throw left-wing activists and Antifa under the bus. They're going out there and putting themselves in risky situation to show that they don't agree with the government assassination of black people, and they're getting murdered for it in Portland because of right-wing lunatics inspired by Andy Ngo. You can just not defend Andy Ngo. That's the thing. This is so unnecessary to defend Andy Ngo. It's not like Joe Rogan was like, well, yeah, how do you feel about Andy Ngo, bro? You like Andy Ngo? Like, maybe he did do that. I don't have the full context here. I didn't watch the whole show. But, like, why talk about that? You can just deflect and talk about something else. This is just shit. This is shit on my shoes. But let's continue.
Most disturbed me, right, when that happened. That I would see people who would be defending that online who would say, well, he's not, like, really a journalist.
He's not.
Because, like, whatever they would say about him.
Andy Ngo provided kill lists of activists to a far-right neo-Nazi organization called Atomwaffen. He gave them kill lists, doxing addresses to a neo-Nazi organization. He is not a journalist. He is a right-wing fascist propagandist. He goes on Fox News to throw propaganda out there. He edits videos and lies all the time. I've had encounters with Andy Ngo. When I was doing protests last year, Andy Ngo ripped my footage and lied about things that I filmed extensively, and I had to provide, like, a bunch of, like, extra video content to dispel his lies about, like, he clipped my video out of context, lied about it, and I provided the full video, and, because, again, that's what he does, and he does this all the time with people. And everyone's constantly having to show the full videos. He's lying about anti-fascists all the time. And again, Ben Burgis doesn't need to... It's very unnecessary for him to go into this elaborate defense of Andy Ngo. It's extremely unnecessary. Like, it's not like, this is like a calculation where it's like, if I defend Andy Ngo and then say you should join DSA and buy Jacobin, then maybe I could get like a +4 on, like, maybe I'm doing the math, and then it's like, maybe I can get maybe I'll lose 38 of my followers, but maybe I'll gain 42 back, and they might, and then they'll tell their brothers, and then maybe we get socialist, communist uprising. Like, what is the calculation here? It's just weird. It's so unnecessary.
Right, he's like a propagandist, or he's like really siding with like the Proud Boys or one of these groups, or whatever. And it's like the misinformation thing, right? Like, who gets to decide, right, what counts as a journalist? And I certainly don't want that.
Who gets to decide? Again, Ben Burgis, if you're going to talk about Andy Ngo, please know what the hell you're talking about. What? I don't understand. What? You don't know what you're talking about. If you would have looked into any of these claims, you would know that they are all true. But again, I am an activist. I have had Andy Ngo threaten me. I remember when he was reposting all of my stuff when I was covering protests. I had thousands of death threats from these motherfuckers. Like, he has openly been conspiring with his people. Like, it's documented. You could just look it up. So if you don't know what you're talking about, why would you talk about it? I don't know much about, how to construct an airplane. So if I went on someone's show and they asked me about how I would construct an airplane, you know what I would say? I don't fucking know. So if you're going on Joe Rogan's program, right? Again, why would you bring up Andy Ngo and defend him? Like, you could just say, I don't really know much about that, but, X, and move on to something that you do know about. This is so unnecessary. It's so ridiculous. And it's sad. It's sad. And people need to give him pushback for this, because this is IDW stuff. This guy is like, he's the new Sam Harris. That's what this is. He is trying to be like a modern day Sam Harris. Or maybe you could say he's trying to be a modern day Christopher Hitchens. He just wrote a book about him. Right? So, like, that's what he's positioning for. He's trying to be like one of these weird, like, pseudo-intellectual IDW types. And it's weird, and it's sad, and it's embarrassing to watch. And I want to provide pushback for this, because if I can potentially help him find, or like reason to him in some way that can help him change course, that would be good, right? So I want to help him change course. If he wants to come on the program and have a more in-depth conversation about this stuff with someone who I'm trans, right? I've actually had Andy Ngo attack me, right, online. I've had Andy Ngo fuck with me online. So these are two things that he is wrong about that I have actually extreme, like, knowledge on compared to other hosts. Like, let's be honest, right? Does anyone else out here that's going to be in this, like, weird media space that we find ourselves in, do they have experience being trans or also being harassed by Andy Ngo specifically? I've been harassed by Atomwaffen, right? Atomwaffen swatted me before, right? So, like, I mean, I'm very familiar with these groups. I have been on the receiving end of their violence many, many times. I've been on the receiving end of being trans and having violence related to that, right? So I would love to provide my experience to Ben Burgis and hope that he goes for a course correct. But he's going down the Glenn Greenwald, IDW, Sam Harris, like, fucking rabbit hole, and it's sad. And I'm going to comment on it. I mean, I wasn't afraid to comment on him when it comes to January 6th. So, I mean, I'm going to continue to comment on him, and then we'll see what happens. But it's sad. This is just the most recent example of Ben Burgis kind of just selling out the left for no reason. No reason. I mean, there's no, like, I can't, the only reason I can see is that he's dog whistling to the right. He's like, yeah, if you're a fascist, maybe, come over here and listen to what DSA has to say. Maybe we can get some fascists to join the left. I don't know. I can hope that he's got some sort of strategy that he's going for. And it's sad. But anyway.